Hello and welcome to our channel, Lady T. My name is Nathalie, and today no gaming content, but we're back with book reviews. Because years ago, when I started YouTube, I mainly focused on book reviews, and somehow along the line, it became more focused on gaming content, on Let's Plays, and the book reviews kind of went to the background until they were gone altogether. So I recently rediscovered my love for books, and I thought, let's go back to the reviews because I miss kind of doing those. Because nothing screams motivation like new deadlines, extra work for my hobbies, and extra editing time. Yes, I love my life. And we're starting with Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. Where is my dust jacket? With Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. Woo! A book I DNF'd, by the way. First off, there are spoilers in this video. I wanna get more in depth with these reviews other than just, oh, I liked it, or I give it 3 stars because there was romantasy, you know? I wanna go a little bit more in depth to subjects that are presented in the book or how the heroine is presented, stuff like that, so I will have to give you some examples. Mind you, I DNF'd this book when I got to page 111, because apparently I liked the 3 ones, which is also the star I gave this book, coincidentally. So, with that in mind, let's get on with it. So, Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries, written by Heather Fawcett, who I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, by the way. If we take a look inside, is the author of the middle grade novels Amber and the Ice Dragons and The Language of Ghosts, as well as the young adult series Even the Darkest Stars. She has a master's degree in English literature and has worked as an archaeologist, photographer, technical writer and backstage assistant for a Shakespearean Theatre Festival. She lives on Vancouver Island, Canada. This is clearly a writer with a lot of knowledge. You know, you don't just get an archaeology degree, I assume. They don't just hand it out somewhere beneath a bridge like some bridge troll. That is all I'm saying. Like, you have to be very smart. And I kind of got that through her writing, but we'll get there in a moment. Because first, we are going to look at who our main characters are. And shockingly of all, of course, there's an Emily Wilde, who is supposedly the main character of the story. A story in which our Professor Emily journeys to a small town to the far north to study local fae. Since it's her specialty, that's what she chose to graduate in, I suppose, in folklore. All in search of more knowledge of the fae and perhaps to encounter a few if possible, because you never know with the fae, of course, a magical adventure begins. Or so the book and thousands of 4 and 5 star ratings would have you believe, because I've rarely read anything more drab, uninspired and dull throughout my entire life. And yes, I am counting those books written by my teachers that they shamelessly plucked to me while I was doing my bachelor's, because they were the writers, not because it was the best book for that course, necessarily. The main characters. First of all, of course, we have 2 main characters. It will come as no surprise to you that one of the main characters is Emily Wilde. I know, big shock. She's the woman on the front of the page. This is who this whole story is supposedly about. More on that later. The main protagonist with whom we journey to an island up on the far north, which is supposedly somewhere near Norway, where she journeys because of her scholarly interests in the fae, who are supposed to dwell around there. So her plan is to go there to interview the locals there and maybe meet a few, maybe get some hands-on first-hand experience. Like, I believe that is her goal. 111 pages in, and it doesn't really feel like that is her goal, but she keeps reminding you that it is. Immediately upon setting foot on the island though, Emily makes it more than clear that she is not interested in socializing. While there for her job to interview the locals. She has done little to nothing to study or read up on the area that she's staying in ahead of time, which for a scholar is a bit odd, if you ask me, to say the least, especially when you consider that most professors themselves and scholars will hit you over the head if you come into their class unprepared, not have done your homework or not citing your sources correctly, and she can't be asked to read up on anything before she goes there, even though she has been working there for quite a few years at least. Really? And while we're told she has worked at the university for quite a few years, she still fails to try and understand or go along with what the locals are offering her, which she is supposed to already know that is a part of the job, because, again, this is not her first, well, I think, if I remember correctly, this is her first solo outing out in the field, but she has been on many outings before. So she knows full well what part of the job description is and how she is supposed to prepare. This isn't her first rodeo. She goes as far as refusing kind gestures and thus coming off as rude to the locals, which sets her off on the wrong foot with said locals. Judging by the reviews of some readers, this is one of the quirks of Emily Wilde that sometimes gets tagged as autistic coded. I want to make it clear that the writer nor the book ever state that Emily Wilde has autism or is autistic. Thus, I will not say that she is or that she has, because who am I to make the diagnosis of a fictional character? I just want to convey to you that some people think that she is or feel represented by her as a character in a book. What I will say is that I'll get into this topic later on, after introducing you to the other important character in this book. What I want to get into deeper later on is if whether this is yet another harmful misrepresentation of a seemingly autistic-minded or autistic-coded character in media, or if people feel like this was done right. Before we get there though, let me introduce you to the second character. He isn't the protagonist, but he is like a second main character. I suppose in my head he isn't the main character, but he's present. He is very present. And that is Wendell Bumblebee, whom to me was the only reason I actually managed to make it to page 111 in a positive way. He is an ass. He is an idiot. He is egotistical. He is selfish. He is an utter asshole, but he's charming, so that makes up for that. It's a romantasy, people, so you know. He is an ass, possibly a fae, mingling with human beings for seemingly his own entertainment, as the fae seem to do, and sleeping around like he has a sack full of goodies that need shipping before the tariffs get too high. Yeah, yes, Menacing Jill, and I am kind of here all for it, because the book was so utterly boring and dull to me that he was kind of a saving grace. Otherwise, I would have DNF'd the book at page 50 or before. Yet, I will also acknowledge how toxic he really is. Apparently, he's the love interest. And from what I've read later on, it turns out he has had feelings for Emily the entire time. Now, it might be a thing because of the fae, of how they court and how they love, but I think there is something to say against sleeping around with random women and then not bothering to wake up the morning after, forcing those women that you slept with to go down, to sit down with the love interest, which is Emily, because at that time they're staying in the same cabin, and Emily kind of is forced in a social pressure kind of way to make breakfast for them and make sure that they eat before she has to send them on their way. You know, how everyone shows their love interest, how interested they are in them by sleeping with others and making the love interest deal with it. That's a totally normal thing to do. And after all, the female main character can't be too rude to handle all of that, right? Because she can't be rude. She has to be nice and she has to be the caregiver or something. I don't know what we're going for here. Now I know there's a part of fantasy readers who are just here for the romantasy and are happily kicking their feet when this kind of man shows up. And I'm saying men with quotation marks. And I'm happy for you. Your era is clearly now with all the romantasy that's been coming out, which is not my cup of tea, but it's great if it is for you. If you like a male character that is actively talking down upon the female lead, making fun of her quirks that make her who she is, thus kind of forcing her to change, and actively being an asshole, then this might be for you. Great, I'm not shaming you, that's just what's going on in the book. They get together at the end of the book, apparently, which I wouldn't know, or somewhere in the second or third book of this trilogy. Honestly, from what I've read, I think the story could have been told in one book. If you really enjoy this kind of thing, I fully understand that you love 3 books. Just like I'm probably the only person in the world who loved The Hobbit more than the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the movies. And so I was perfectly happy with the 3 movies that we got because I loved them, and the more the better, you know? So maybe this is the case for you as well. Me, personally, I don't like boys like this. To me, they are not men, they are boys who are throwing temper tantrums, and I don't like them in fiction, I don't like them in real life. Because, yes, it is fantasy, but I want to believe that these characters can actually be a match and come together at one point. If these two end up together, like, of course they will, because it is romantasy, then he has a hell of a lot of character development to go through, both of them do. And I kind of expected that to kind of start somewhere within the first 100 pages, which is the first 1/3 of this first book. And there is just nothing. Because for some reason Fawcett doesn't believe in dialogue in this book. We get a whole darn lot of monologue, which can help if it wasn't so dry and so boringly written. And there was loads of monologue. Structural problems. I probably liked Wendell so much because the character of Emily Wilde was so dull and one-dimensional to me, that I needed some of that sweet, sweet chaos. And yes, before you ask, my husband does indeed call me a chaos goblin every now and then, and I do happen to favor playing a bard or wild sorceress in D&D, so maybe Emily Wilde's character just wasn't for me, which would have been fair enough. I have no problem with scholarly types or dry writing necessarily. I think a good example of this might actually be another book I read recently, which was Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. That book and its writing reminded me of texts written in my college books that I had to dig through for all my classes, only to still drop out before I got my bachelor's degree. The writing in Children of Time was a little drier and more scholarly than the books I would normally read. However, in that book, it was implemented in a way that made me feel like I wanted to keep learning and to keep reading on. Adrian Tchaikovsky had studied psychology and zoology, which you can tell are both heavily sewn throughout the entire story, and you can tell that he has a very good grasp of psychology and what different situations and events do to a human psyche and how that can snowball into something else. Yes, to some people it may come off boring to hear so much detail, for example, about entomology. But for me, as someone who is interested in psychology and biology, it was so interesting to read a story where these themes were delved into to a deep degree, where I felt I was learning while having fun reading the story still, like it didn't take away from the story itself for me. That's the sort of book I normally enjoy. And when I started off the first chapter of this book, I was hoping it would do the same thing. That Heather Fawcett was someone who had a great interest and knowledge in archaeology, or any of the other fields she decided to study, meaning she would probably have a lot of passion for it that shows through the page. Maybe tell us something about the downside of being away from home for so long, or not being able to find something yet compelling at the same time. And I think she sort of managed to do that, but it was just a little too bland in writing for me. It felt like she was droning on too much about things that truly didn't matter to the story at present, at where it was at that point. Like, the first part was, but then she kept going on and on and on. And it just felt like the story wasn't moving at the right pace because of it. That's why I said the story could have been a lot smaller, because there were so many details that were just necessary. They weren't necessary at all. But the going on about the same subject was not necessarily the problem in and of itself, because I love it when people get enthusiastic about the things they have a lot of knowledge about. And I love to hear, like, Tchaikovsky and entomology, love that. But this was so poorly executed that I began skip reading to go through the drabble, as I would describe it. And that is not a good feel, because I usually don't want to skip through anything, because if I love a book, I'm not going to skip reading, I'm going to reread sentences if they're brilliant. So that says a lot to me when I go skipping through something. All we see and hear of Emily herself, the main character of this book, is how she doesn't like to socialize, how she clearly lacks empathy, how she's a recluse, Bramblebee, and how she can't stand him and the land. There's so many descriptions of the land, its fauna and flora, that at some point I began to feel that the land itself was the protagonist and Emily just so happened to be here. Also because, again, Emily was so dull to me and so one-dimensional that the land was more interesting as a character. Her monologues were dragging on in the same manner I tried to get out of a long hike up a mountain when my in-laws insist that we do go on a hike again. It feels like the book is trying to be something it's not, like she couldn't really find her footing. Honestly, I think this story would have worked better also from the third person's point of view. Heather Fawcett created Emily as the polar opposite of Wendell on purpose, like to balance the two characters out, with him being more flamboyant and charming and outgoing and pushing the boundaries, while she kept to herself and avoided social interaction whenever she could. I often felt like Emily was created for that reason, like maybe she came up with Wendell first and then she was like, oh, if he is so outgoing, we need someone more like a little grey mouse, but make her almost proud of it, like unapologetically herself, to the point that she comes across as an asshole. Because you can also make the point, would I have the same feelings about these characters if the roles they had were still the same, but the gender switched? I explained this poorly on screen, but my thoughts on this are, no, I don't believe it would have made a difference for me personally, because I also don't like male characters like this. However, I do think it's important to note that female characters and real women get tagged as aggressive or rude quicker than male characters and men do. I just don't think that was the problem here. So, where you have Emily, who just seems to be created or dulled down, maybe even to make Wendell shine more, which is a crying shame because Emily is supposed to be the main protagonist of this story. And Fawcett actually also made me forget that there was a dog. That's how boring it was. And that's criminal. Yet I also want to say that this is something we see in more media, not just in books. The lead is a woman to draw in the female viewers or the female readers, while the true story revolves around the man, the second character, not the main character, but the second character, the man, who is not the protagonist, and as the woman changing who she is gets made fun of, while the noble man looks past all of her flaws and still manages to fall for her. You know? Like, it feels like Emily was created with that purpose in mind, and not as this strong character who can stand on her own 2 feet and can figure the world out for herself. Not that every character needs to be able to do that, but Emily that's why she felt so one-dimensional to me. Because it doesn't really feel like that's a story about a woman, does it? Also, the problem is that Emily, not Ellie, Emily, has very little to no redeeming qualities to her. And that's curious, because why doesn't she? Yes, I would much rather have a flawed character over Mary Sue, but there has to be something to like. And that was lacking for me in regards to Emily Wilde. I have tried to read books where the lead was a male and suffered the same exact problems. It feels like Fawcett doesn't know Emily as well as she does Wendell. Either that or she felt more in tune with Wendell than she did with Emily. Because when I read the passages including Wendell, I felt a lot more joy in her writing, more playfulness, more excitement, especially when Wendell and Emily were conversing with each other. Not just from the character itself, but from a writing point of view. And when it was just Emily again, the quality sunk again. Which was a shame because there is potential in Emily's character, for sure. Maybe show her realizing she made a mistake by not socializing enough with the locals and making some wrong turns, which she didn't do on purpose, but it happened still. Have her try to make it right by herself. Maybe she can try to bake some cookies while she has never baked before, because it's not really a thing, but what else can she do out there in the mountains? Improvising as she has to, because there is very little around, and she burns the cookies, but because they see the attempt that she's trying to make, they're like, you are not maybe necessarily forgiven, but we can move forward, and the bond gets restored because of what she chooses to do by herself, instead of having Wendell have to come and swoop in to save the day. They make the locals warm up towards Emily again, which is what's happening now. Make my female lead stand on her own 2 feet and figure it out rather than having to depend on the man to fix it all. There are already so many fantasy books that suffer from this problem. When there is supposedly a female lead or a female character, and there is always just a sort of hopelessness to them, and I would expect better from a female writer. But at the same time, I get that for a lot of people this is a trope that they love. It's just a shame that we keep seeing it over and over and over again. Because especially with Emily, she's a scholar, for crying out loud. She's not a lost puppy. She has been doing this job for a while. Come on, she can handle herself, or she should be able to do so. For example, and this is not from a book series, but from a game, Claire Obscure Expedition 33, which, spoilers ahead, just so you know. One of the characters is called Lune. She is not a protagonist, but it feels to me as if everyone in the story is kind of on the same level of importance with what they're going through and their input into the story, because of how amazing the writing was. She's a scholarly type, a great word, why do I keep putting that in a script for myself? Conditioned by her parents to think like a researcher and to focus on the goal. She's not taught to handle her emotions or to talk freely about them. There is some overlap there with Emily. Like, they're very goal-orientated, and she wouldn't sit down with you with a cup of tea and be like, hey, how did that make you feel? Let's talk about that. You know? The kind of vibe. She's pragmatic, can come across as a bit rude, isn't really in touch with her emotions, and is more focused on what needs to be done than on how the journey to get to that point is going to be experienced by the other expeditioners or by herself even. Much like Emily Wilde, she's mainly focused on the goal rather than the journey towards it. And there's also a possible love interest present in this story, because with Verso you can either decide not to romance anyone, to romance Ciel, or romance Lune. When you choose Lune, you delve deeper into who they both are and what they mean to each other, even if it doesn't go as in-depth as the romance between Verso and Ciel does. We see connections that make this road believable still, just like Verso has some members of his family projecting what they needed him to be, who he should be, and how he should act, because they had this very vivid image in their minds of who he was. Lune had the same done to her by her parents. They had high expectations of their daughter because of the situation they grew up in and the role they had in their society. You could argue it was rightfully so, since the world around them was literally crumbling and dying. But she was a young girl with no other choice and no other point of reference than her parents and what they told her to be and how to act. So they are both people who rather observe than delve right in, first trying to get a measure of people, someone new, and are very goal-orientated. And thus their feelings first grow into friendship, because that is a safe base to start off from. Not that Lune starts trusting him, because she knows full well that he is bullshitting them up until some degree at least. I believe that's because she recognizes a lot of herself in him, and that's what she would do in his stead. Now, did I have a point to this, or did I simply want to talk about this amazing game? I think my original point was that, yes, that Lune, I'm getting there. Lune is also a scholarly type and has a lot of resemblances to Emily Wilde, but she is a much more likable character. Not just because we get the visuals and she is hot. I mean, it helps, let's be honest there, because looks do help, no matter how often we say don't judge a book by its cover, but it does help. Her character is written in a far more pleasant way because she has redeeming qualities. And because you understand why she is the way that she is, which maybe for Emily that happened somewhere between page 112 and... How long is this book again? Over 300, like 315 or something like that, my copy at least. Maybe it happened somewhere there, but I expect more within the first 111 pages, especially at the font size that was used. You know, like it wasn't one letter per page. I can expect more. Lune isn't so detached to the point of insulting people on purpose or on accident. Now, Lune is not as openly physically reassuring towards Verso as Ciel is, even if they are pushed towards a relationship, but she does speak to him after something upsetting has happened to him, and she tries to offer comfort in a way that is meaningful to her, with facts and perseverance, which is again her redeeming quality, like she's at least trying to comfort someone, which might not be what Verso needs in that moment, since he seems to gravitate more towards Ciel, like a kick dog finally finding warmth and affection, but Lune is still offering it to him, showing that the writers of Lune knew full well who Lune was and gave her depth, which could have been accomplished for Emily Wilde in this book. Just like Lune, she could have also been given a love interest who had more in common with her, or at least appreciated her for who she was. And it might come later on, but you have to give some hint of that being present, especially in the first third of the book. Why else would I continue reading? Like, it's not after I finish the first chapter you have me hooked. You have to keep hooking me in and reeling me in. There are so many books out there, so much media. Why would I continue to read your book if nothing is happening? Slow burns are great when executed right. This glacier was moving so slow it practically melted by the time I reached page 111, and so did my interest in the book. A topic I want to touch upon, changelings and autism. I want to state again that I am aware that the author nor the book itself states anywhere that Emily Wilde has autism, yet a lot of the readers in their reviews mention how they either recognize themselves in some of her traits, while others describe her as autistic coded. And honestly, that's the vibe I got too when I was a couple of chapters in. The reviewers mention that this is due to Emily not picking up on social cues, her lack of empathy in some cases, and avoiding social interactions whenever she can. And I just want to say, if this was actually meant to be representation, I feel like the autistic community deserves better than this. Because it just feels like there are so many characters out there across several forms of media where neurodivergent traits get picked and chosen like cherries in a barrel, and the shiniest, easiest ones get picked, like the not picking up on social cues, her lack of empathy, and the avoiding social interaction. Those are the characters that often get put on these characters without the one creating the character glancing at the other cherries in the barrel to get a better feel of what the entire barrel is about. For those with autism who love the book and feel like they were represented or even represented well by Emily, I'm very happy for you. I'm not trying to speak for you. I'm just trying to explain how I view this and some of the reviews I read online, which made me stop and think and do some research. And I'm perfectly aware that's coming from me, a person who isn't autistic themselves, so who am I to say anything on the subject? Here are my 2 cents on the topic though. I have known a handful of people throughout my life who are autistic. They don't represent an entire community, I'm aware of that. That's one of the reasons I keep using both phrases, have autism and are autistic, because some of them felt like autistic is who they are, and some felt like autism is something they have. And I want to try and do right by both sides, so I use them both. What my problem is that the character of Emily Wilde has worked at this job for quite some time, as I mentioned earlier in this video. Several years, in fact, including her studies. Now, someone with autism, in my experience, would know full well upfront that this job requires you to be sociable to a certain degree. There is a social aspect to the job that you need to perform to do the job well, like in research. They might not like it. It might be the only thing they dislike about the job, but they know it is a part of it. And while avoiding it while they can doesn't mean they won't do it. Because what I have noticed is that my friends and colleagues with autism had a great sense of responsibility, greater than the ones who weren't neurodivergent. If you take on the responsibility of this job or that task, you do that to the best of your abilities. That seemed to be the mindset. And if you can't do it, you ask for help. In fact, some of the people I've known with autism who do a lot of research up front or make sure they didn't offend someone during a new social interaction. They would ask ahead of time what was expected of them, trying to color in all the things that weren't colored in yet for them to go into the social interaction knowing almost to the T of what was expected of them, down to all the little nitty-gritty details, to make sure that they didn't offend someone or didn't step on anyone's toes, because if you keep doing that without preparation, to them it felt like then you're going to be a social outcast, you're going to be made fun of, you're not going to find an easy link with people if you can't perform like everyone else. So there was a lot of preparation ahead of time to meet those social standards. And that alone shows great empathy towards other people, which Emily Wilde seems to be seriously lacking. Like, she doesn't even try to match in with the locals. She's just so dead set on doing what she has to do that she forgets a part of her job, which seems really odd. So to say Emily Wilde is autistic or has autism, I feel is doing people with autism a disservice. An autistic person would not torture a changeling child to achieve their goals. Overall, I would say people with autism have a lot of empathy, sometimes too much, where they can't regulate it and get stuck in the emotions of others. People with autism are not cold and detached. They are sometimes too attached, which means they have to keep their distance to keep themselves safe, which is different from being a recluse for the sake of not having to interact. Media often gets this wrong and takes these outer signs of what they think an autistic person is feeling and going through, and they don't look at what's going on inside someone's head or someone's psyche. Again, this might not be the case for the entire community. This is what I've learned and was taught by former friends and co-workers. So you may feel, if you have autism, that you were represented brilliantly if you even see Emily Wilde as an autistic person, which, again, not the author nor the book ever state that she has. She just seems to be written in a way that is autistic coded to at least some people. Also, I want to touch upon the changelings in correspondence to autism. Because yes, this is a fantasy book, and I know it's not real before you start that. But it's a world that is similar to our own, but not quite. With that being said, this book was printed in this world and is present in our world, meaning it doesn't live in a vacuum. As such, I want to call out that the changelings in folklore at the time that they were created were meant to put a face on something that was feared and misunderstood, or the behavior of the children at least was. As was the case for a lot of fantasy creatures. Don't go into the woods because a witch might get you. For example, warning people not to go into the woods alone because you never know who or what is out there, and creating a witch character, of which people already understood very little about witches, made them fearful enough not to try, or at least be hesitant to go into the woods alone, which preserved your community and kept the numbers up, hey ho. It was a great way to deal with the masses and to control them. Now, changelings represented people who were neurodivergent. People were, and still are to a degree, afraid because behavior presented by some neurodivergent people isn't considered the norm, and thus not considered normal, if there even is such a thing. Having a child that was different, acting out, being difficult to handle, was not the parents' fault, of course. No, it was the Fae who had taken a perfectly good and healthy child and replaced it with a monstrous changeling, a substitute. How better to take responsibility and guilt away from a person than to give them a reason to put the blame on something else that is out of their hands? Substitutes would just so happen to present a lot of neurodivergent traits in day-to-day life. If you want a great video discussing this topic and a deeper dive than the one I am offering you here today, you can check out this video by this creator. Here's a quick summary of the blog she wrote, so I'm going to read it to you. Changelings are, for example, described as shaking their hands, shaking or fidgeting, which you might also recognize as autistic stimming. Some changelings have difficulty learning speech and or math, which this creator goes on to explain is also seen in people with dyscalculia, dyslexia and ADHD. While on the other hand, they might be geniuses in other areas, displaying great talent. These changeling children are also often described not showing love or care towards their parents in a traditional acceptable manner. This is what we also see in neurodivergent children. And it made sense. Psychology isn't all that old yet. Only about 147 years ago, when in 1879 German physician Wilhelm Wundt founded the first formal psychology laboratory, officially separating psychology from philosophy. It became its own science at that point, basically. So, back when these folklore tales were brought to life, people of that time period would have looked very differently at people displaying odd behavior. Odd as in not up to the norms of regular standard society. It's not an excuse as to their behavior, let that be clear, but that was the knowledge that they had up until that point. What we saw happen due to these stories in the real world was that these children who were considered changelings were left abandoned, killed, tortured, harmed, neglected, harmed in any way, all because they were given the mark of being different and possibly Fae, which there was no proof of, besides the proof that people made up in their own minds because it fit their narrative. Why else would a child act out or not love you the right way, other than it being a fake creature that simply replaced your own? Surely it has nothing to do with the kid's brain working in a totally different way from your own and you're incapable of meeting their needs. Surely. We still see this to a degree in our modern world. People are cutting off contact with their parents. Some of those parents come to take responsibility of what they did or didn't do, which is the best outcome, and I assume it's the least likely outcome too, but a lot of parents take to TikTok or other social media, Facebook, to complain about children not being grateful enough and cutting off their own parents. To me, this shows a great lack of reflection, just like it did back in the day when people claimed it was changelings and not their perfectly happy, healthy child just having different needs than what the people at the time could offer. There must be something wrong with the child, which still seems to be a mindset that we have today. Returning to the actual book I'm talking about. I'm sorry that this video is getting rather long, by the way. I don't think Heather Fawcett knew about this. She doesn't strike me as the sort of person who would still feel meant for this to come across this way. I'm just giving it the benefit of the doubt here because I also didn't know until I read some of the reviews on Goodreads and learned about it. So I'm not going to fault her for that. But to label Emily Wilde as fully autistic with that knowledge creates some problems, and I don't think it's fair. Still, I feel like some characteristics were taken from people Fawcett might have observed in her daily life or in other media, and often autistic traits are used in this manner to create someone cold and attached, without giving them more layers or truly understanding the character, which sadly seems to have happened to Emily Wilde as well, unfortunately. In this instance, I just feel like Fawcett tried to create a character that didn't come naturally to her and failed to truly connect to Emily, which made her feel one-dimensional and like a creature of characteristics rather than a character. And while it's good to look outside your comfort zone, I also do think we need to be more aware of what we're referencing in our writing and media overall, rather than simply thinking, oh, this sounds like fun, let's have at it again. Yes, the Fae are interesting concepts, there are still stories that can be told and explored within the world, they're highly popular right now. Characters who are more focused on themselves rather than the world around them are fun. However, I also believe that they were made up one time, with a clear goal in mind that we now know was harmful. And if she had done her research, I'd like to think she would have been a better person than to add a scene in which Emily actively tortures a changeling child to reach her goal, which didn't warm me up towards her as a character. There are plenty of other ways she could have gone around it or come up with another strategy to still reach her goal. Why was torture the first thing she thought of? But the Fae child in this story is diminished to a thing rather than a person, which makes sense if you look at it from the world within the book. Like, Fae are supposedly evil, changelings will never change even though they are called changelings. I know that's not why they are called changelings, but you know. It's supposed to be a monster rather than a living being, which we know. I hope I don't have to explain to you that people with neurodivergence are often seen throughout our history and even to the current day as monstrous to a certain degree, like unpredictable and all the negative things that were said and explained before. And yet the changeling is a living being. So what does that tell you about the main character when she too diminishes that being to nothing but a one-dimensional monster? This scene simply reinforced an old use of this created folklore creature that I hope we can finally leave behind, especially when you consider what the background is. Because Bilbo from The Hobbit, I don't think I need to say that, but hey-o, has already shown us decades ago that you don't need to use force to get to where you need to be. Howl's moving castle. I'd like to think that up until this point I have been very reasonable, very demure, very put together, you know? But now there is an emotional opinion. People had the audacity to compare Wendell, especially with this entire book, to the same level of Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. No, just no. I'm probably coming off as a book snob right now, but I don't give a flying flip. You You completely missed the excellent writing by Diana Wynne Jones, the hidden layers, the depth to the characters of Sophie and Hal and all the other characters in the book. If you think that this was anywhere near the sophistication of Hal's moving castle, okay? I'm not saying yet that Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries wasn't great, it wasn't, but heyo, but it was nowhere near the level of Hal's moving castle. Stop falsely leading people to believe that Wendell is as layered as Hal is, because that ass isn't. And if it's there, it might be in dialogue that were never shown in this book, because instead we get dreary monologue that adds nothing to the story overall. Anyway, you can ask me why I would make a review about a book that I DNF'd. Well, because it took me 3 years to get to page 111. You can't say that I didn't try. I tried for 3 years, okay? I thought maybe this isn't the time for me to read it. Maybe it still wasn't. It just sucked, in my opinion. That's why, Susan. No, but genuinely, I tried so hard to like this book. I really did. That's why I gave it 3 years, because I was really hoping, because I love fantasy, I love cozy storylines where there isn't a lot at stake necessarily. Give me those slice of life, feel-good stories, you know? But this wasn't it. Yes, there were fae, but the main fantasy aspect came from me envisioning myself creating a stop-motion movie one day when I finally got myself to sit down for long enough to focus on one project rather than the actual fantasy story right in front of me. On that, I want to commend Heather Fawcett. Even though I didn't like this particular book, I think she definitely has it in her to write a great story, otherwise she wouldn't have gotten published as much as she did. Although there is also Colleen Hoover. Look at all the sales she made. Look at how many people love this book and her other books. Good for her. And the character of Wendell might actually go somewhere. I will never know, because I wasn't interested enough in this story necessarily. Which doesn't mean her writing is bad, that's not what I'm saying. This particular book, it just wasn't for me. It isn't going to stop me from trying some of her other books though, because I do think she has some great ideas. I just hope that this was a one-time off for me, especially because I already got the books on my shelves. There are simply too many issues with the writing and the story overall for me, personally, that rendered me unable to finish this book. Let's take a look, to wrap it all up, at the pros and the cons for me. Pros! There are fae. DNF was an option. And Wendell, as insufferable as he was the best character. Cons. Changelings in relation to autism, which was just not a good look. The wrong point of view used. I still think the third person point of view would have been better. Monologues were too long. No chemistry between love interests. Too little dialogue. One-dimensional main female lead. Excusing the main male lead for his behavior. Trilogy when it could have been one book or 2 books at most. Unimaginative, this has been done before and better in those cases. Unrealistic scholars. Dry writing that didn't manage to be interesting. Try too hard at being something it was not. More importantly, let me know what you think of the book down below. Maybe you loved it and I love that for you. This is just my opinion. It doesn't make it fact. It doesn't make it real. It just makes it my opinion. Woo! There are books and genres out there for everyone. Clearly this wasn't for me, and that's okay. And it's okay if this was for you. My book reviews are going to be more in depth from here on out. Not just me going, oh, I like the book. Because the writing was there. Because what does that mean, you know? I used to keep them a little tighter, but I want to delve into the written word more now. As such, my sources are linked in the description down below. If I got anything wrong, please let me know, because I would love to learn and a discussion is more than fine. Maybe you believe I took this way too far, which is also fine if you can be respectful about it in the comments down below, otherwise you just get blocked. No harm was meant to be caused by making this video. I just want to state that because we live in a world where sometimes you can't make any comment anymore. As I have said many times throughout the video, but I want to reiterate it just to be very thorough. I'm not saying the character of Emily was meant to cause harm. I just think the link between changelings, autism traits, and some of those traits represented in Emily left me with a foul taste in my mouth. Next video, I want to return to the wonderful world of Howl's Moving Castle. It's one of my favorite books and one of my favorite movies of all time, so I'm definitely biased, but I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the characters of the books and what is going on in the story. So that will come out somewhere this year. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a very, very lovely week ahead. Goodbye! Now, a topic I want to change upon. I want to touch upon